Hi, Genesis Eakes here, and I am honored today to be in the studio with John Griffin, who is the Director of Global Programs for the Maxwell Leadership Foundation. So, John, tell me a little bit about what you do for the Maxwell Leadership Foundation.
Well, I have the honor of actually working with an incredible team of folks that oversee different programs that we do both in the U.S. and around the world that are all based on values. And so I get the privilege to really oversee the deployment of each of these programs. That's probably the simplest.
The simplest way to put it, I get
Yeah.
that. So, when you were thinking about values and values-based leadership, tell me, why is it that values are so important in this day and age?
So it's the Maxwell Leadership Foundation.
Mhm.
Our patriarch is John Maxwell, and so one of the things that John Maxwell says, and I know you know this, Genesis, is vision without action is just a dream, but action without values is a nightmare.
Mhm.
And a lot of the challenges that we have in the world are really people with great intentions will throw money, resources, and time at big issues, but they don't go really to the foundation of values that really gives all of these actions meaning and credibility, authenticity, that really produces results. And so the impetus behind it all is we want people to live and learn good values so that they can change their world and the world around them. So I'm passionate about that because that's part of my journey as well. And so that's why it's most important.
Thank you. I love that. And it is important. I think when we are talking about transformational leadership, I think it's one of those things that there's a lot of people that lead in this world, but if they're not leading integriously,
Mm,
meaning where their values are actually matching what they say they believe and how they're leading, then sometimes there's a disconnect.
absolutely.
And the people that are trying to follow them have a hard time, and their organizations suffer, and the world around them tends to suffer when we end up in that situation. So, tell me a little bit more about some of the global programs that you run. I know that you are working on something called community transformation. Can you
Mhm.
tell me what community transformation is?
Sure. In its simplest form, is really bringing people together to learn and live good values, and use that to begin to turn it into community efforts to bring about positive, powerful change within their community. And the power of that is we're building a community together where people will um, not only learn more about how they view values, but to begin to sit around a table together and to hear what others say about those same values without judgment. And what we're finding, well, first of all, what we're finding is most people don't even know what their values are.
Mm,
They haven't
that's
thought
true.
about it. And so the values that they're talking about aren't necessarily their core values for them, but it is a way for them to come and develop a common understanding together, a common language within the community, but also common unity. And you marry those, and it's community. Um, it's just the power of that discussion of people coming together without judgment to better understand each other, and all of a sudden turn that great unity around to where now they can begin to focus on tackling some challenges as a community.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I think all you have to do is listen to the news or take a look at your social media feed,
Sure.
and there are a million different ways that we can have disunity or discord or ways that people are dividing right now.
Yep.
They're dividing up into teams, and they're dividing up into, hey, my idea is better than your idea. And there's all of this stuff that's like backbiting and infighting. And even within organizations that are typically, you would think that they should be on the same team, if you
Right.
will, or even I do a lot of work with organizations, and I know even within organizations, you'll see a lot of that infighting within the same organization.
Yeah.
Was working with an executive team just a couple of weeks ago, and it was interesting to me that this executive team that they all signed up, they have the same mission, or they've all agreed to this same mission. They're all trying to lead this large organization towards this one goal, and yet they're fighting each other.
Mm.
They're fighting each other in this and trying. It's not about whether the mission's going to succeed or not. It's really everybody's still jockeying for position. They're trying to figure out, who's right, who's wrong. They're trying to oust people. I mean, it's just crazy. And I think that's just a microcosm of
Sure.
what we're seeing happening in our culture at large. And so when you're talking about these common values and being able to come to a place where we have a common unity, that's really fascinating
Yeah.
to me, where
Absolutely.
there's a place where we can do that. And I think there's a lot of talk that where there's people that are talking about where in the past, before we had technology and the blow up of the internet and social media like we do now, there was a lot of reasoning around a global public square. There was a public square, and there was places where ideas could be shared without judgment. It wasn't that every idea was great or that it was all, yes, that's a great one. But it was more along the lines of, hey, we can come to this public square, we can
Yeah.
share ideas, we can banter them about. At the end of the day, we still value and respect one another. And I think there's some of that that's been lost a little bit in our day and age. So I like what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, it gets easy to hide behind a screen.
Mhm.
And anymore, it gets really easy for people to hide behind their ego.
Mm.
And it's the ego that really, you just said, people are trying to figure out who's right, who's wrong. Who cares? How about we just try to understand what the issue is we're talking about and work to better that. And that's really what ends up coming about. People begin to learn that as they talk about values, there's not a right and a wrong. It's what is your perspective on that, and what are you doing with that? And that's really what makes people come alive when they begin to understand. Oh my gosh, you mean Jenna, you're a human being, But behind that ego or the social media persona that we all put on, when we begin to talk about values and the things that are important to us, and people hear that, all of a sudden, people become human beings to each other, and not just these human doings. And there's a lot of good understanding that goes along with that. So it's no longer, I'm right, you're wrong. It's like, no, I better understand you, and I think we can tackle this together.
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's so important for us to be able to see one another. And I think that's what employees, if we're listening to the marketplace right now, that's what employees are clamoring for, right? I think coming out of 2020, we had the great resignation.
Yeah.
And I think now we're dealing a lot with silent quitting and a lot of what the workforce is saying. And I think just people in general are saying, do you see me as an individual? Do you hear me as an individual? Are you paying attention, or is it just about you? Is it just about your own ego? How is that interacting? And I think it's an important conversation, and I'm so grateful
Absolutely.
that there's places like the Maxwell Leadership Foundation that is furthering that conversation in our world. So tell me a little bit, because I do know a little bit about your story, and I know this is not the only job you've ever had in your life. You actually started out in engineering, if I remember correctly, and you've worked for companies like NASA and IBM, and you've actually been a successful business owner yourself as well. So you've had this whole storied journey. Storied sounded a little sounded a little bit like it wasn't great, but it was actually a very successful journey. You were pretty successful all along the way, but you've gone through all of that, and now you're in this position today and heading up initiatives like transformation initiatives around the world. Tell me why.
Um, Tell you why that's important to me, or
Yeah.
why I'm even doing it, or both?
I think it's a both and question.
Okay.
Go ahead and dig
Um,
into that. What brought you here? Why?
sure.
What was that journey? And then, yeah, dig into it more.
Um, we could spend an hour talking about that, but the short story, I grew up in a home that was very abusive. And in that journey of the abuse of my mother, um, who went undiagnosed till I was 20 years old, of telling me how worthless I was and wish she never had me, and then the physical beatings. I believed those lies as I grew up. And so when I was in college and I was studying engineering, there was a personal transformation in my life where I realized um, that I was created for more, and so were you.
Mm.
So was every human being on this planet. They are so much more than they even realize, and that awakened in me. But then I go into the marketplace. I interned at NASA while I was in school, but then I went to IBM straight out of college, and I was gung ho. I got excited. I dove into that. My ego started growing really big, and I was allowed to lead a team of engineers there, and I failed miserably.
Mm.
And it was because I was more interested in what I knew than what they knew. And so I had to do a reboot in my own personal journey when I was in my early 20s. And that stayed with me in my life as I then went and began to create businesses that my ego, I always had to be able to step my ego out of the way and really try to understand the people, the situations around me, to understand that everybody's got a story. I had one, and it showed up in bad ways early on. It serves me really well right now. Everyone has a behavioral style that they're naturally wired. Everyone has values. And that's where all of this came into play for me, to where today, throughout my career, I had all kinds of wonderful opportunities that fed my bank account. And I get paid to do this job, but more so, it feeds my soul.
Mm.
And that's what gives me endless energy and passion for this, is because when you have something that feeds your soul, you can do it forever. I got the gray hair now, to earn my stripes, but I don't anticipate. I can't imagine a day not doing what we get to do,
Mm.
because of the impact that it has when it's something as simple as a conversation about values, not to tell you what you should think, but to say, Genesis, what do you think about valuing people when we say that?
Mm.
And to hear what you think about it versus what I think about it, and giving no judgment, but to understand, okay, knowing how you feel about it, how I feel about it. Now, how can we take those two perspectives and do some really crazy, incredible things? And that journey has played into that, because no one in my childhood ever took the time to really try to understand why I was acting out so badly. And a table like this, I've seen it so many times. When I say tables, that's we get 6 to 8 people sit around a table and talk about a value and what are you going to do with that value. And there's vulnerability there that we've given people permission, for many of them for the first time in their lives, to actually share something personal. Not everybody does it, but those that do, it begins to peel back the layers of their life and understand that under all of that is someone incredibly great that can have an awesome impact in this world.
That's so cool. And it just kind of sparked a question for me, and I don't know if you're going to be able to come up with a story off the top of your head, but as you were talking about having people sitting around a table and these amazing conversations that you get to have with them, the question that was coming to my mind is, what's your favorite transformation story?
Mm, wow. Right now I have two.
Okay.
One is a police chief who was in the tables, and he was talking about the value of valuing everyone, and he said, how can I value everyone? I I'm going to struggle with that.
Mm.
And the power of the tables, by the way, is we don't comment on anything anybody says. We let them wrestle with that, but we get to hear their struggle.
Mm.
And he vocalized that by saying, how do I value the person that I'm about to go arrest for beating their spouse or for abusing a child or murdering somebody? How do I value everyone? That's a little too broad for me. I don't know that I can do that. And, when you facilitate these tables, you just say, thank you for sharing. And it's gut wrenching. But for him, he went away and he came back the next week to report out. And his report on that to say, what has he done since our last meeting? He began to get tears in his eyes. And he said, I'm not the judge of people. The justice system, the creator of the universe will take care of that. My job is to value that person as a human being that's made some awful choices. But I'm going to value them as a human being and let the creator, let the court system handle the rest. And for him, that's how he sorted it out. The other is very simple and quick. Is a person, an offender that was in prison. Apparently, I'm on a law enforcement kick here. But a person who is incarcerated, and they went through this particular lesson or value called forgiveness. And it's really just about keeping the load light on you because unforgiveness will weigh you down so much when you're not forgiving people who've wronged you. And this person who's incarcerated for murder was acting out a lot based on a horrible relationship with their parent, their mother. Similar to mine, not necessarily the same. And because of that, he realized and said, I forgave my mom. I didn't wait and didn't depend on her response to that whatsoever. I just freely forgave her. And now today, I've experienced so much freedom as a result of that. And he's incarcerated and he's experiencing so much freedom. It's one of my favorites.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds really powerful.
Yeah.
That's what that sounds like. Oh my gosh. So I love that they're two very different examples as well. Mm-hmm. One person obviously incarcerated and probably will be so for the foreseeable future. And the other one in law enforcement in their vocation, working their job. And it kind of made me think a little bit about, some of the things that we talk about that I talk about a lot is that I believe that businesses and organizations exist to solve the world's greatest problems. Mm. At the heart of every business, I know sometimes businesses think that they're there to chase after money or profits. And yes, we need organizations to be profitable and all of that. We're not saying that because cash flow makes a big difference in how successful and what you're able to do. But at the heart of it all, whether it's a nonprofit organization or a business endeavor that is for profit, they exist because there's a need. Yes. There's a problem that they're trying to solve. And so tell me a little bit about how you would talk to organizations if you are working in a community and you're seeing there's in any given community, there's businesses, there's nonprofit organizations, there's volunteer opportunities, there's a faith-based community, there's government, there's education, there's all these different things that kind of help make up a community. So what would you say to all of these different organizations that are hopefully trying to solve the problems in that community? Is there a way that they can work together?
A resounding yes. The challenge in most communities is everyone thinks they're the only one, and that there's a prevailing scarcity mindset that there's limited resources, limited grants, limited volunteers, limited fill in the blank, and not realizing that there's other people probably even in the same office building that is just doing something in a little slice of the solution for a big problem that happens to be probably a problem that you have a little slice in. And what if we all began to understand that if we begin to coordinate efforts, not to do the exact same thing, but to understand each other's play and the potential impact that individually they can have, but the far greater exponential impact they could have is if they just adjust a little bit and begin to unite together, that they could then, starting from a place of understanding, it's the values, but to begin to see, oh my goodness, there's a whole world of possibility out there. You and I talked just yesterday, and you actually said one of the things that you felt like that this process really does is allows people to dream. And we're seeing that in communities all over the place, is that people are now given permission, not by us, they're giving themselves permission to dream of a better and a bigger and a brighter future for their family, for their community, for the world around them.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that is so amazing. Because when we think about, I know we live in the United States, and in the United States, a lot of times we like to, as people in America, we like to say that we're the land of opportunity, and there's all of this stuff that happens, and it's so great. And all of those things are true. However, when we really start talking to people, and when you're out in the workplace, or the more people that you engage with, the more that I've discovered, people don't actually live that way.
No.
They don't actually live that way. And it doesn't really matter whether it's here in the United States where we say one thing, hey, this is the great land of opportunity, or maybe in other countries that I've been to where they don't say that as part of like their mottos or something like that, but they live, their people live the same way that we live here. So it doesn't necessarily matter what they say, but it's how they live, right?
Yeah, we've been spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
And we had dinner yesterday with a good friend of ours, and one of the things that he said, Ray, he said, people love to talk about opportunities and love to talk about impact, but when it comes to them stepping up and actually doing something themselves, it gets to be a challenge then, because now all of a sudden, is it really a priority in their life or not? It gets easier for us all to be Monday morning quarterbacks. And talk about what could have, should have been. It gets easy to sit in a meeting and talk about what we could do, but it gets really hard when we actually have to step out and do something. Mm-hmm. And in a way, I love our country. I mean, I love the United States and the opportunities it's given us. As I've traveled the world, there's two prevailing comments that I get from folks in other countries. Not comment. One's a comment. One is an attribute. The comment is, you all have it so easy there that you create your own problems, just to have problems. But what I see in the other countries is, because people haven't necessarily been given the same opportunities we have, when we open this kind of dialogue with them, they're hungry. And what I see is they not only talk about it, but they're doing stuff about it with great passion and for hunger for change. And I get inspired by that. And we see it in pockets around our great country as well. But I see it predominantly around the world as we get to go into different countries.
That's really amazing. I love hearing that there is transformation that's happening around the world, and that is, I think, like what you were mentioning before, it's easy for all of us when we're in our own little sphere of influence, our own little pocket in the world, that we can think we're the only one that's trying to make a difference. We're the only one that's trying to work for a common unity or to work for a better good in the future, that we're the only ones. And so I love being able to hear stories about other people and other places, other organizations that are doing amazing things. Because I think that's where, like what you were talking about a minute ago, within like a community that's starting to get transformed, is creating that alignment with one another where they can say, you know what, you're doing something amazing. I'm doing something amazing. I wonder if we can collaborate. I wonder if there's room for all of us. And I think there's space in that, more getting out of the scarcity mindset and saying, yeah, there is room, because we do have all of this that's available to us, and how can we all work together to make it common good?
Absolutely.
So one final question.
Hmm.
Taking all of this, looking at that individual, so maybe it's an individual business owner, or maybe they're a leader within their organization. They're listening to us here today, and maybe they're getting inspired. Hopefully, they're getting inspired about that they're not the only one, but they want to take more action.
Hmm.
They want to do more good, maybe in the space that they've got. What would you recommend? What's one thing that they could walk away from, and maybe if they wanted to implement this week, what would you say?
Uh, It's a great question. The way that you formed it, if I were talking to an individual or business owner, I think the number one thing that I would tell them is to do some self-reflection, see where an area that you're passionately curious or want to have an impact on, and begin to learn about that to apply things in your own life. We say it from a standpoint of experience transformation before you go expand it. If you're a business owner, look at either what you've already experienced that's made your soul come alive, or look at the areas where you could become a better leader, experience that by learning and applying it, and then go help others in your organization or in your family or in your community do the same. But don't do it as a philosopher. Don't do it as somebody who is learn some information. We always talk about influence, impact, and income, but most people like that other eye. They want information for information's sake, and that's not what we're talking about. We we get information, we learn it, and turn that around into ethical, authentic influence to have an impact in our community, and income will follow. It'll happen. It doesn't give us an excuse to, just go spend money and not pay attention to our P&Ls and all of that. But it starts with learning and living it out first before we go try to do it in our organization around the community.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I love the reflection part, because I think sometimes as leaders, we like to do.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't always take that time to stop for a few minutes and really do that self-reflection and think about, where is it inside? Where have I been transformed? Where have I had? I love how you were sharing earlier that you had a massive transformational impact moment in your early 20s that helped literally shift the trajectory of your life.
Yeah.
And I know when I was in my early 20s, I was great at, I was a really good student, we'll put it that way. I was great at really hearing all kinds of stuff, and I would teach what I knew up here, and I'd try to pass that on and as a young leader. And it wasn't until I really let it transform me, until I really let the information sink in and be like, no, it can't just be what I know up here. It has to be that lived out experience. That's when I actually started improving and getting better and being able to have something, right? Because you can't give what you don't have.
That's right.
And I thought I had it because it was up here. And understanding that there's this little transformation that happens when something travels that 18 inches, right, from your head to your heart. And that was a big moment for me as well. So, John, if there are leaders that are interested in community transformation, where would you have them go for more information?
Then go to our website, maxwellleadership.org. And that's probably the best place to go, because there's an email there if they want more than what's on the website. But they'll see different links for all of our different programs, whether it's our youth program I lead, or community or country transformation. So I would start there.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today and letting me have this opportunity to interview you and pick your brain, and just for sharing what's been going on around the world so we don't feel isolated, and also for that great takeaway. So
Thank
make
you.
sure you guys do that time and reflect a little bit this week. And if you want more information about community transformation initiatives, reach out to maxwellleadership.org. Thank you.